Does anyone else wonder why in Dune Spice Wars you'll win some fights and lose others, and you don't necessarily know what went wrong? Well, today we're going to look at two fights, one that went in my favor and one that went against me, with very similar forces both times. And I'm going to walk through, I'm going to talk about a lot of the subtleties at play here, about why things happen one way or another, and things to look out for, maybe some best practices for battling. Let me set the stage for you. This is near the end game sort of area of a battle between me on House Corrino and, what's his name? Let me look it up, I'm sorry. Azcanta playing House Ecaz. I was feeling pretty cocky, like I could crush him at a whim, and he put up a pretty staunch defense. So let's take a look at this first fight, though. So I am invading Ecaz lands. In the background, I've got 30% of Chom shares, so my Corrino army is very sauced up. I've got all the techs I want. I've got a very wide army of a lot of conscripts with Wencessia to buff them up, a couple of Sardaukar, a Kronos flying overhead, and I am currently taking land from the Ecaz. The Ecaz see me, they hop into their ships, and they fly up to fight. First mistake. Actually, a Landsrad just passed, giving everybody 3 of the Landsrad guards. These are actually incredible units to use for defense. So these guys get 50% damage reduction. So just a flat, they only take half damage from things. If they're in your own territory, and this is all Ecaz territory that we're fighting on, so these would have been perfect to lead the way in fight. Instead, they end up going over here and they fight the rebels, and they don't contribute to this larger battle at all. So it would have been great to have them fight. You can see that I have my orbital strike for House Corrino prepared. I saw him flying in. Another really important part of battling is intelligence, right? Where's the enemy's army? Are they coming in? By me knowing he is on his way and having everything prepped and ready for him to land, I get the jump on him and he does not get the jump on me. I sort of fire off the stuff that I need. I start targeting things down ahead of time. You know, knowledge is half the battle, right? Knowing what's going on and when to expect things. So the Ecaz come in and land, and immediately there's another problem. They've landed too close. So this is their airfield. And the trouble is their airfield is a bit forward, and they have opted to land right next to my army. They would have been better served to land right on top of my army or further away. If they land on top of me, it's just a chaos melee brawl, and you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. But Ecaz generally are a tougher melee faction than the Corrino conscripts are, at least. Corrino Sardaukar are another thing, but I'm a heavy conscript force, so I'm counting on my conscript riflemen to do a lot of my damage, so landing on top of them at least would have thrown a lot of things into chaos. It would have made it a little more difficult for me. The worst possible thing is landing nearby me and disorganized. If you look at the Corrino army, I've got my melee troops, my conscript swordsmen, my Sardaukar are in the front of my army, and then my ranged things like my incinerators and my riflemen are in the back of my army. So he's got to fight my tankiest units first, and my higher DPS units can target fire stuff from the back. Meanwhile, the Ecaz army lands and they're disorganized. They've got some range stuff in the front, they've got some melee stuff in the back. It's gonna take a little while for guys to run to where they're supposed to be in the battlefield, and their range stuff, which is a bit more vulnerable, you kind of want to protect more. Because they're sort of right in the middle or mixed in the front, it's much more easy for me to target them down. Now, this battle also is really heavily decided by a super strong orbital strike. Immediately, the orbital strike starts coming down. And orbital strike is very strong. The downside to orbital strike, for Corrino, is that it does AoE damage. So if an orbital strike missile comes down and lands on this square here, it also will do a little bit of damage to any of, the Corrino units that are engaged with it. But the orbital strike only falls on the region that you use it in, and because this is a separate region up north to this region down south, I'm able to cast the orbital strike on the southern region, so it falls on his guys that are further back, and the guys that push into the Corrino side are not getting hit by the orbital strike, So they're not taking the damage, but I'm not suffering the downsides of that sort of AoE damage, right? Normally that is sort of the balancing factor. Orbital strikes are very punishing, but it can punish the Corrino as well if it's a big mixed up brawl. And that is not the case. So in this case, the missiles get to just rain down on the Ecaz, and Corrino gets to sort of sit back with impunity. So he does a pretty good job. Immediately he's trying to target some of my weaker guys, but here you see where the layout is, the formation almost is causing him trouble. Because my melee guys are in the front, he has to sort of walk around them. You get slowed if you're in melee contact with somebody, so these guys move slower. They try to walk around, they're trying to get to the weaker guys in the back. All the while, these guys are blasting away, and I'm focus firing on his musketeers, who are much weaker and already sort of in range of my guys. So this plays out about as you'd expect. I'm able to focus fire. Once he runs past my melee and they're no longer blocking for me, I just run my melee into his ranged and we start chopping up his guys. So he's trying to kill my weak ranged guys. I'm trying to kill his weak ranged guys, and with the benefit of the missile strike on top, it really turns it. Also, you can see that even the backfield, there's another a mechanical unit sort of out of place. This guy should be up front. He could be helping. In a big battle like this, every extra unit you can bring to bear, every extra perk or bonus that you can add to your strength has a big knock-on effect. What you often see in battles in Dune Spice Wars are not the huge attrition where I lost all my guys, he lost all his guys. Usually in a big battle, something goes wrong for one side or another, or there's a bad engagement, or something is in one person's favor and not in the other person's, and there's definitely a snowball effect where I kill 3 guys of yours before you killed any of mine, and now I'm able to just focus fire and mow down the rest of your army and take really minimal casualties, right? And just like real life, all the real casualties come if you try and disengage. If you try and run for your life, everybody's gonna die, right? Once the morale breaks and the people start running, because you get slowed by being in contact with other people, it's generally easy to chase down stuff and kill them. So it's really hard to disengage. So you need to be very thoughtful about if you engage, right? In this, we can already see it's starting to go bad for the Ecaz. We'll watch it as Corrino just sort of cleans them up. And you can see very lopsided. I've lost about 9 command points worth of units. He starts to run. We pick up another unit or so, and then because he's running, I'm able to choose his most valuable thing that I want to kill, which is his hero here. And because chasing is strong, we're able to finish off his hero, and I let the rest of them run out. Though we probably even could have picked up another couple if I wanted to chase. The orbital bombardment does its job picking up a couple of them too. And it's a very strong Corrino victory. I mean, maybe a third or half of the Ecaz force gets away, but we lost like 3 units maybe, or not much at all. So very strong win, and it all came down to some positioning, to having the knowledge of him coming in and me having the orbital strike ready to drop on him. Really favorable positioning of being able to drop the orbital strike on the adjacent region that will hit him and not punish me for it. Just a bunch of stuff in our favor, and it looks like Corrino totally dominant, right? He lost that fight so badly, how could he ever win? Well, let's take a look. Let me jump to another timestamp here. Boop, something like this. So that same Corrino army got reinforced with whatever it lost, has pushed forward, and we've attacked sort of the next region here, and we've even finished annexing the previous region. Now the Corrino army is a little mixed up. We're all sort of on top of each other, and the flagship, the monument for the Ecaz, is a bit out of position. It's gone too far up. So I smell some blood in the water. I jump on it with all of my ranged guys, and we start shooting it. Now there's a couple things in the background here as well that contribute to this. I did lose 1 conscript by just sort of missile turret and defenders when I was taking this. Just sloppy of me. You shouldn't lose a guy when you're just fighting some militia. So I'm down 3 command points of guys. Not a big deal, but it does contribute. Also, in the meantime, I had used an orbital strike on him again, and it caused my agent to get captured. And because my agent got captured, I lost the intelligence level that I needed in order to prep an orbital strike. I had to move another agent over. I'm going to have to wait for the intelligent level to finish up. But I don't have my orbital strike ready because my agent got captured and I was just slow to replace him. Another thing that happened was CHOAM shares had dropped in between this, and by the extra CHOAM shares came out and diluted my control of the CHOAM market. I was at 30%, which gives me a 15% bonus of attack power to all of my units, which is a huge bonus, quite frankly. And then new CHOAM shares dropped, and I fell down to like 29% of CHOAM ownership and lost the 15% damage bonus. Again, it might seem small, but it is another thing that you just add on top here. So I think I'm in a great position. I'm jumping on the monument. I'm not doing quite as much damage to it as I would like to. And he comes in. So now we've got a bit of an awkward engagement where my ranged units are shooting at the monument, the flying ship, trying to bring it down. It's low. It's like 40%, but it's not that low, right? I'm not bringing it down super fast, and meanwhile, we're already engaged with the Ecaz army. I do have my melee units out front, but this time he properly has most of his melee out front. He also has invested in he's the judge of the council, so he's bought some judges and some more Landsrad guards. Again, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 in this army. These are very strong units again. I think judges do like double DPS if they're in home territory. Guards, again, take 50% less damage if they're in home territory, which is really, really strong. People sleep on these, but they're very powerful for defense. I am still shooting at his ship. He is starting to fight my army. And I'm kind of waffling. I think at this point I decide to stop chasing the ship and start shooting his men, but it's already a little late because he's fully engaged, and I make a terrible mistake of picking as my target for my ranged units one of the Landsrad guards. And we start shooting at the Landsrad guard, and it is dying really, really slowly. We're not getting the DPS that we need. It's basically the tankiest unit that he has, and I choose all of my best damage to attack his tanky unit. Terrible mistake. I would have been much better served by focus firing down a knight, by then trying to pick off the buff units, these mechanical units, any of the musketeers in the back. Even and it's a little hard because they have the exact same icon, but if you're able to differentiate and kill the judges rather than the guards, that's a great idea. But basically, I'm spending a lot of my fire on his tanky units, and because I'm a little late to joining the engagement with my main DPS forces, he's managed to focus fire and bring down my frontline units. If you remember last time, he kind of ignored my front line and kind of ran to the back line. Well, this time I didn't have as many in the front. I think I maybe overbuilt my conscript rangers, or what are they called, riflemen, and didn't have enough of a front line. And you can even see even the terrain in this case is much wider open. He can have sort of a concave here where all of his guys can be fighting, whereas before he was kind of trying to run around the side of my guys. But just immediately, he's putting all of his DPS on targets, and mine is a little split. So I lose my front line, and immediately I'm in trouble. I'm not picking good targets, and I'm starting to lose conscript riflemen real fast. And it's going bad. Again, it's this snowball where things get out of hand, and I'm panicking. I'm realizing things are going bad, so I grab my hero and I run. Now, grabbing your hero and running is always a good idea because it's very expensive to rebuild them. But at this point, I've already committed. All these guys are dead. I'm just going to see if Wencesia can live. But there was not that many casualties on the Ecaz that time. See, this is a very similar fight to what we had before, but because the terrain is different, because my target choices were different, because I didn't have some of those ancillary bonuses, that extra power, I didn't have the extra operation. He did drop like his heroism operation, so he's got one of his guys getting 100% more damage. I did not drop any of my operations, so I'm not having any additional support. And I didn't have anything prepped to do it either, right? I could give my guys some supplies, but that's no big deal. What I really needed to turn the tides, and I have the intel for it, but I just didn't have it prepped and prepared, was an orbital strike. I think I might even still lose that fight with an orbital strike, but it would have been much closer. And there you have it. Ecaz manages to bowl me over, chases me down, Credit to Azcanta, he goes on to win with a very cheeky hedge boom here before I'm able to rally the army and come back. But I think it was really a combination of the underappreciated strength of some of these Landsraad Guard and Landsraad Ranger units, some better target acquisition for him, some poor target acquisition for me, and then just, some subtle background factors. I was down a guy at the start, I was down my chome bonus, and that alone was enough to turn the fight. An interesting, and not just turn the fight, but he's got practically a full army left, right? I killed maybe 4 or 5 units, but he's got 10 or 15 left. So he's doing just fine here. He's got a large force. I lost basically everybody but my hero. I'm able to rebuild and come back later, but I just thought it was fascinating that two very similar armies both smash each other in very similar circumstances for relatively subtle differences. So that's all I got for you today. It was a fun one. It's a short one. Something to think about. There's a lot of great subtleties in the combat of Dune Spice Wars, and we might try and do some more videos about this because it's a complicated topic. But it absolutely matters the terrain that you're fighting in, the formation that you have your army in, that you've got your melee units up front, your range units in the back, that you're picking the proper targets for things, and the proper targets can shift, right? You want to kill the enemy's squishier ranged units. But if you can't get to them easily, if you got to spend a lot of time kind of like jostling through a scrum and moving around the sides or getting into range, then you're losing sort of uptime on your fighting, when maybe it would be better just to focus fire down some of these frontline units to make space for that. Or if you've got a wider, more, an army that has a wider melee profile, you don't want to be fighting in those tight spaces where maybe all your guys can't get in. You want to try to convince the enemy to get into a battle more in an open field kind of fight where you can have sort of concave around his forces and bring all your guys to bear. There's a lot of subtlety to it, and it's super fun. It's one of the reasons that Spice Wars is such an excellent game, is because the military aspect of it is very subtle in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways plays out in sort of interesting, almost real-world like scenarios, right? There's another, there's been a dozen battles I've seen where maybe someone is winning, but they just haven't paid enough attention to their supplies and their water. And once the supplies run out, maybe they've been sort of drawn back into enemy territory. Suddenly things are very, very bad for you if you haven't been paying attention to that. There's just so much stuff there. There's so much nuance. I could talk about it all night, but that's good enough for this one. Hope you guys appreciated that. We'll try and do a little bit more if you like this sort of thing. Just thought it would be fun to do. Thanks for watching. That is a Corrino vs. Ecaz fight breakdown for you. We'll see you next time.